Hey everyone, this is Britton here. Sorry, I'm 2 minutes late. I hope you weren't sitting by. Hopefully you were sitting by actually. We're just waiting, anticipating. Tonight we're going to be talking about just answering questions. Like I said, I always have topics planned, but your questions are always the primary topic. That's what we always are going to talk about first. Ashley Melvin. This is for Ashley Melvin. She has some questions. She has some concerns. Her questions aren't unique. Her questions are things that I hear all of the time. They're probably the top concerns, probably the top reasons why people quit homeschooling. And so I just want to encourage you tonight and address some of those things. Nothing that you said made me feel like you should quit homeschooling or it's going to be impossible. I think it's pretty normal. I think that if you just change your perspective and technique a little bit, you'll be just fine. So we're talking about 3 things tonight specifically. One is husbands who aren't super passionate about homeschooling, or they just haven't bought in all the way. And to be honest, that's totally typical. My audience is almost all women. They read my books. They come to my seminars. They are the homeschoolers. They have a passion for this. Most of the time, they've done the research. They know something's not right with their kids, and they want to bring them home and stuff. So usually it's the moms that are at least come up with the idea, and then husbands kind of begrudgingly, they're like, okay, we'll give it a try if you really want to. But that puts a lot of pressure on the mom, because she's like, man, if I'm not immediately successful, he's not going to believe in this and stuff. And so it puts some pressure on it. And sadly, I say, husbands are homeschool killers, or they're homeschool haters. And so generally, it's the husbands that we got to get on board. I highly recommend we'll talk about how to deal with that in a minute. But the husband is the head of the household in my worldview. And so you definitely want to have the husband on board. There's a few reasons the husband probably isn't on board. And I want to address just those really quick. I want to look at my notes too, so I'm not just rambling today. Okay, so there's 2 reasons husbands don't buy into homeschooling. One, they have too high of an opinion of school. They think the school's a big deal. It's been around for a long time. It's got state-of-the-art facilities and teachers, and it's got a huge budget. And these are professionals. They've gone to college. Supposedly, they know all about training children, and they're looking at their wife as kind of a novice. And it's not that they're looking down on the wife necessarily. They're just thinking, how could you compete with this system which is designed to train children, okay? So they think too highly of school, and we'll address how to deal with that in a minute. In fact, this book addresses that. It's the biggest book I've read. Because it takes a lot of debunking to dismantle school from our. It's just so much part of our history, and we bought into all these things, right? Or, and this is horrible, but they think too low of their wives. They look at their wives, and maybe it's not like they know that the school system isn't great, but they look at their wives and think, man, she's not up for this. She can't handle this. They don't believe in the wife, and it's not a horrible thing. Like, husbands are just going to call it, hopefully, like they see it, and they want what's best for their kid too. Like, they believe in the greatness movement. They love the idea of raising children up for greatness. Like, they believe in it, and they feel like, hey, no offense, but if you can't get the job done, let's put them back in the school system. So they're not trying to be mean or anything. They just want to make sure that their kids get a good education. Sadly, that's not going to happen in the public school system. The only way your kids are going to get a great education is if you homeschool them, one, or if you put them into an elite prep school. And elite prep schools cost about 40 to 50 grand a year. Some are 100 grand a year. So it's really not for everybody. So homeschooling is the best option. I think even if I had to pick between the two, prep school or homeschooling, I would absolutely pick homeschooling every time. I think it's better. I talk about that in the books. Okay, the next thing. So you can deal with this 2 ways. The first thing you need to do is probably educate your husband if he's not aware, and that's not an offensive thing, but you've probably been following these blogs more. You're reading about homeschooling more. You're more aware of kind of what goes on, and your husband isn't. So you kind of want to educate him. Public schooling is not a good option. I talk about this, like I said, in Revealing School. Public schooling is one of the worst things that can happen to a kid. Not just that they're getting a bad education or they're getting some liberal influences. The public school system was designed from the beginning to make sure that your kids at best will be middle-class workers. At best. Okay, the purpose of the public school system is to create a working class with that psychology, basically to work a 9 to 5. And they know that Supermen, Einsteins, don't enjoy the 9 to 5. They need people who will sit down and follow orders and show up to work on time. None of that's bad, but that's what they're trying to create in the public school system. And they're not trying to create world leaders. And so a lot of the curriculum is just watered down. It's just nonsense. A lot of it's just social justice, kind of like indoctrination. That's part of it. And then you have these elite prep schools, and they're taking kids in a totally different direction, and they're really raising them to rule the world. So if a husband wants to give their kid a good education, they have to homeschool or put them in prep school. The public school system is designed to hamstring a kid. The other purpose of public school was a daycare. They wanted to get the women out of the homes into the workforce, and they needed a way to do it. So you have low-income women, let's say, and they need then this low-income, cheap labor into the workforce, the capitalists, right? And they're like, well, how are we going to do it? Because some of these women are having 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 children. This is back in the day. And child care is going to be so expensive, we can't pay them enough to cover the child care, so they're just going to stay home. But what if we devise a socialist system where the government will tax the people and distribute it, right? So that every kid can go to school, so that we can get the low income moms into the workforce. And it sounds horrible, and it really is, and that was the purpose. It was never about empowering children. It was about indoctrination. It was about hamstringing them, and it was about getting their moms into the workforce so that you could have cheap labor for the capitalists. So that's the short of it. There's a lot more to it than that. School's extremely dangerous because if you've studied Pavlov's dogs, the drooling dogs, that's the foundation of educational psychology. It's not necessarily just about educating your kid or putting things into his head. It's social engineering. And I talk about that more in the book. So school is a very dangerous thing. I think you should be able to see that from the product that's coming out. But maybe you don't fully understand, or you fool yourself into believing, well, you know, from the sidelines, we'll be able to mentor our kid and put him on the straight and narrow, and we can overcome that. Many people think that. Okay, many people think that, and many of them are wrong, and they're so disappointed. I've talked to so many people just over the years, and I even warned them. I even talked to them about it, and they put their kids in anyway, and now their kids are coming out. They just lost their kids. They've walked away from their faith. They have a totally different worldview and ideology. The parents lost. You're not going to win if you put your kids in the public school system. The public school system, they are professionals. They actually aren't incompetent. They know what they're doing, and they're very good at it. And they have your kids all day long. They have your kids after the kids go home because of homework and school sports and stuff like that. So the parent actually becomes just kind of like an observer, and the school raises the children. So homeschooling shouldn't be on the table. Okay, now the pregnancy thing. Okay, pregnancy, it's hard. You're a mom. You've got to run your home. You can't think of it like you're replicating school in your home. You can't pull the same hours. You can't sit down with your kid all day like a teacher. You just don't have time for that. I don't have time for that in my home. My wife doesn't have time for that. We both run businesses. We work very hard. We scramble all day long. We don't have time for it. Have our kids suffered academically? Absolutely not. If you follow our system that we outline in the books, like education and character and stuff like that, your kids should be leading themselves to greatness at a very early age. We put some time in, way back in the day, we put some time to teach our 2 older daughters to read. They're the oldest. And now they teach the younger ones. And we have enough curriculum like Blue Manor Academy. You don't have to sit there. This crazy technology now. We can film a video for your kid. We can do the best, like I said, we could hire somebody from Harvard, let's say, pretend, and they do the best economics class in the whole history of the world. I said that because I watch these sometimes. They do a great one. They record it. It's online. You have that forever. You don't have to reteach that for every kid. That's what's so awesome about technology. You can put them onto Blue Manor Academy. We have audio there. They can go through the books on their own. You don't have to babysit them. You don't have to sit there in the classroom all day. Go do your own thing, and then you just kind of monitor. We recommend teaching for time. Actually, we haven't got the clock on there, but we're coding it now. And you'll have a time goal that you'll set for your kid, maybe 30 minutes or 15 minutes in the beginning. And your kid will work for that time goal instead of a curriculum goal. But it's exciting as you see the time count down, and they can kind of self-regulate. The curriculum, by design, you have to kind of get through all of it. And once you get done with a book or quiz, maybe you just focus on one subject all the time, fine. But eventually you'll check that book off. You don't get any more points for it or anything. And you'll have to go to the next book. And it doesn't matter. You just do a little bit of that every day, and you don't have to have hands-on. Like it's horrible. I don't even hardly know what my kids do all day. I just know that they're some of them are operating on like a genius level in math and writing, and they basically self-plan, self-educate. They do their own thing. Hey, James, how's it going? What's up, Shelly? But they kind of lead themselves. So once we teach the kids to read, they can teach themselves. And then is our older daughter now, she's 13, and then my younger daughter, she's 10, she's about to turn 11. She basically runs our homeschool, and she does a phenomenal job, and she's reinforcing the lessons for herself, but she runs our homeschool. My oldest daughter wants to be an artist like her dad, and she also wants to be an author like her dad. So I'm teaching her. I put a lot of my energy into the oldest kid. I kind of mentor and shape her, and then I tell her, hey, you know, your little brother, he wants to be an artist too. He works really hard. I'm like, teach him, lead him. And I'm going to be looking at his art, and then I'm going to judge you. Are you a good teacher? Hey, how come Jonathan doesn't know these basic art principles? Are you teaching him? And we've had a phenomenal success with that. So we're not even the teachers hardly. We let them teach each other. So that takes some of the burden off of us. We did the exact same thing with chess. You know, we had Audrey. She was our first chess champion. She won the state championship her first year. The next year I said, you know, that's great. You won. You know, we'll take you out for ice cream. But this year, you're going to get double ice cream. We'll reward you if your sister wins, if your brother wins. Take them, lead them for victory. It's great that you're a champion, but are you a master? Are you a leader? Can you lead someone else to success? And so she mentored them. She taught them. She trained them. She pushed them. And then they all three, gosh, it's been a few years because of COVID. I think it was a year or two ago. I think it was 2 years ago. They all won the state championship in chess. And people were like, man, you're such a good coach. Like, what do you do with your kids and stuff? I'm like, I don't even know. They teach themselves. And that's the truth. The burden is not on me. If you follow this method, the kid's going to be hungry and they're going to be driving themselves. So that's one. Okay. So that should hopefully give you some hope. Like your kid is turning, I think 7, right? Or just turned 7. He's entered the age of reason. It's going to get easier now. You're not dealing with a little baby anymore. And we're going to start talking about just really quick motivation technique. So hopefully we've handled the husband thing, okay? We got to get the husband on board. He needs to know. I would highly recommend him reading the book, Revealing School. School should be off of the table. You cannot raise your children for greatness with public education. You'll be lucky if they come out in one piece, okay? So that's off the table. So you've got to make this thing work. The pregnancy thing, the other thing is that might be a great time to teach your kid about pregnancy. And hey, when mom comes home from the hospital, she needs your help. She needs to contribute a little bit. You don't have to do the academics every single day. When you go to public school system, we do school year round. They take off 3 months in the summers and the kids don't fall to pieces. After you have a baby, maybe you just take 2 or 3 months off and he just does chores around the house or you read to him. It doesn't have to be that, you don't have to follow the public school schedule. It doesn't have to be 7-8 hours of schooling a day. Like I said, my kids do. Someday I'm going to film it. I'm going to show you what our kids do and you'll be shocked. And then I'm going to show you how high they perform. It doesn't have to be super burdensome. If you need some time with the baby or you need some bed rest or something like that, you don't have to babysit your kid all the time. He can take care of you too. And he's learning something valuable about it. Someday he's going to have a wife. And she's going to need some extra loving and you can train him now, right? All right, next thing, motivation. So you described some things to me that makes me think your kid is lacking 2 things. It's not offensive. It's reality. I think we all struggle with it, but motivation and self-discipline and maybe self-control. So again, I can't go through all of it, but read the book. The last chapter is all about motivation. And so many new homeschooling moms, they think, and we go to conferences all the time, and everybody's talking about motivation. It's always fun, how to make learning fun. Fun is the least effective motivator for anybody who's 7 and up, basically. Kids, yeah, like preschool, they don't care about the other values. They just want to have fun. I get that. But once your kid turns 7, fun is probably the least effective motivator. And I always tell people, the Navy SEALs, or I went through Special Forces Green Beret training. And when we were in training, they kind of went around the room and you told everybody like why you were there. Like what was your motivation for trying out for Special Forces training? And it's the most grueling, painful experience of your life. And you're just hoping to get a green beanie and then you're going to you're putting your life on the line. There's a good chance you'll go get killed in combat or something. So people were like, what brought you here? Nobody said fun. Not one person in the room was like, I'm just here for a good time, okay? These are the most highly motivated people in the world and nobody said that it was that they were there for fun. Some of them were there for a challenge. They wanted to challenge themselves. Some of them, they wanted to serve their country. These were deeper level motivations. Some of them, it was a career path. They wanted to achieve great things and they wanted it was like a career promotion. If you get a Special Forces tab, it's easier to work your way up the chain of command. Some people wanted an adventure. Some people just like combat. They like fighting. They just, I guess you could say it's fun and they enjoy it, but it's not like fun in that sense. It's rewarding, I should say. Understanding motivation. I actually don't want to go through all of it because I did a video. If you scroll down, I actually did a whole video on motivating kids, not using fun. And another problem is most people don't use, when they motivate their kids, they're not using a primary motivator. It's very simple. They'll say, hey, if you get your school stuff done, you can play video games after. Really shot yourself in the foot with that. Because the kid is now motivated to play the video games. So the whole time he's doing his lesson, he's thinking about the video games or the reward, and it actually makes like his math that much less fun because he's comparing in his mind. He's got the video games coming, but he's got to get through these questions. And so he rushes through his work, and then he does bad work, and then he's frustrated because you want him to correct it, and he's just thinking about video games. It's really a way to shoot yourself in the foot. If you want to reward a kid, maybe you do it at the end of the week, but he can't think that that's coming as soon as he gets done with his stuff, right? You want math to become the primary motivator. And there's a lot of different ways. Again, I talk about how to make the education, the math, or whatever you're trying to teach the primary motivator in some other videos. It's in this. But to just give you one example of how you transform math into a primary motivator, I'm going to use geography because my kids, they weren't super thrilled about geography for a while. They were for a bit when they discovered like Google Earth and stuff. But after that, it kind of got boring. I just couldn't get them fired up for it. So I put them into a geography B, a competition against some of their friends, homeschooling friends, and then the state, right? All of a sudden, I had transformed math into a primary motivator. One of those primary motivators is competition. Kids love to compete. So all of a sudden, it wasn't math, it was competition. They could get a trophy. They could beat other kids. They could be embarrassed if they lost or got a question wrong. And all of a sudden, my girls, they were buying their own curriculums online from Amazon and shipping it to them. I'm like, what are these? And they're like, they bought it for themselves. And they were studying, all the time geography. And they are whizzes. And they became whizzes in like a few months because they were super motivated. But if we had continued from a textbook and it wasn't a competition, a primary motivator, it was just a textbook, my kids, they wouldn't have cared. I never could have got them. So you have to transform the actual school into the primary motivator. You can do that with fun sometimes. So that is, one way to do it. But you got to think of the other motivators, like a challenge. Leadership is a powerful motivator. Letting kids lead, letting kids teach their siblings. I do that all the time with reading or something like that, or with art. Like I already said, I empower the child to teach the other kids. And as soon as they're the teacher, they're the authority in the room, they learn it better themselves because they want to know the right answers. I did that with chess club too. Sometimes I'd have my daughter teach or something like that, and then she has to come up with her own lesson, so she's going to learn it better. And they kind of take pride in leading, and they want to set the example, like I really know this stuff. So anyway, I don't want to go through all of that tonight, but you got to find a way to motivate your kid. I highly recommend you just read the book. I do a better job in the book than I do in these live videos. I've thought it through. I have it all outlined. I'll walk you through the steps of how to properly motivate your kid by turning the actual educational subject into the primary motivator. Next thing, this is the next book, Character. In Character, I have two great chapters, one on discipline, one on self-control. I think discipline was probably the best chapter. My editor was like, it wasn't the most beautiful chapter or heartwarming chapter, but it's the biggest chapter. And she's like, and it was so well put together. I've never heard of discipline that way. It was just like genius how you just laid it out, and it makes so much sense. And I defend, traditional discipline that they've never heard. And if you've read the books, they're different. So I do a great job in there. I'd highly recommend you just read the part on discipline and then self-control. And self-control, it was really funny because this is what I mastered, okay? I mastered the self-control. Not personally, but I know how to do this. And it's because I was one of those kids that kind of had like ADD or something. They thought they wanted to label me and drug me in school. And I acted out a lot, got into a lot of trouble. And eventually I ended up in a military boarding school. That's where I went to prep school. Fort Union Military Academy, out in the middle of nowhere in Virginia. But it's a prep school. They do a very good job. And in the world of prep schools, there's the elite kind of preppy, whatever, ritzy ones, and then there's the military schools, and it's all about discipline and drilling. And generally speaking, it's the kids who get into trouble because it's an all-boys school. It's very disciplined. It's not super fun. Generally, it's kids who are kind of getting in trouble. There was kids who were kicked out of public schools, and it was either prison or military school, or they were kicked out of other prep schools, and they had to find another one, so they ended up in this military school. So this military school takes some of the worst kids, and they know how to discipline them. I mean, we had no problems almost from day one. But one of the first things they did is that they realized that for a lot of us, we just had never practiced self-control. We were so used to being wild in the school, we almost couldn't sit still anymore. And it's just like if you go for a run the first time. If you run with somebody who runs marathons, and you don't know that they run marathons, you're just like, wow, that person they just have a gift. They can just run. And you go for a run, you run down to the end of the block and you're feeling sick and queasy and you're like sweating, you can't breathe. Your muscles are cramping. It's because you're out of shape, not because you can't run. It's the same with a lot of kids. Like they've never practiced self-control. And then all of a sudden at a certain age, you're like, sit down and do this work. And they've never built up the tolerance. It's the same thing with church. Kids are used to Sunday school. Then you bring them into the pews one time and they can't sit still. We had that issue with our kids. But as they go through and they go to church regularly and they sit there longer, and now my kids, it's no big deal. An hour and a half sermon, they can handle it better than me sometimes. But they have to be trained for that. And when we got to prep school, they trained that with attention exercises. It's because it's the military. You stand at attention. Hopefully you know what that is. I talk about it in my book. And basically, it's all about developing self-control. You can't have any emotions. You can't smile or frown or anything. You have a blank face because you're focused on the mission at hand. Your hands are at your side. Hopefully you've seen a soldier at attention, maintaining attention. And we tend to think, it's just some drill or ceremonial thing that they do. It's not. It's about developing self-control of body, mind, and spirit so that you can focus on the mission at hand in the most extreme environment, which is war. Your buddy's head just got shot, and you got to focus on the mission at hand. So you're learning how to filter all of the distractions out. You can deal with that later. You can warn your buddy later, but right now you're at attention. You're focused on the mission at hand. Kids need that kind of training too. And I've done that before, after church. I said, okay, you guys couldn't sit still in church today, so we do a self-control training, or they just sit at the table. I usually set a timer, and it depends on the age, but it might just be 5 minutes. It might be 15 minutes. You sit at attention, which means you sit there, you don't talk, you don't look around the room. It's like blank. You just blank. You can think, your mind can travel, but everything about your body is at attention, is focused. You don't move, you don't fidget, you learn self-control. And it doesn't have to be a punishment. It should be a challenge. You could see with your son, you could sit him down and say, hey, I'm going to set the timer for 1 minute. Let's see if, you probably can't do it either, Ashley. It's tough. So sit down with your kid and see if you do an attention exercise. So, learn what that is. Read the book. You put your hands at your side. You just stand there straight. And, you don't make any facial expressions, anything like that. And you just sit there. You don't move. You don't fidget. You don't scratch. Just try it for a minute and make it a challenge. It'll be a fun game for him, and then build up that exercise and see if you can do it for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes someday, and your kid will develop self-control. And he won't be so antsy. He'll be able to sit down and focus. When I got to military school, we had mandatory 2-hour study every night, and if you were in honors classes, which eventually I was, you had 3 hours of study. And during this time, you couldn't get up to use the bathroom. You couldn't talk. You just had to sit there at your desk. If you didn't understand the lesson, they told you just look at your book. And I remember the first night after 5, 10 minutes, and other kids too, it's like, I have ADD or something. You can't handle it. By the end of the school years, that 3 hours would fly by. I didn't even see it. But if somebody looked at me, or like in the public school, they'd say, well, this kid, he's just ADD. He just needs drugged. They're not going to take the time to build up the self-control muscle. So anyway, that should be an exercise, a regular exercise. Build that up in your kid. Help develop self-control. There's another double load motivator. I love this. If your kid gets something, you give him like a math worksheet, and he just won't do it. He just, oh gosh. And you just don't want to deal with that every day. I recommend double load motivation. It's like, I always tell my kids something like this. Okay, you can do 1 worksheet today, or you can do 2. And they always choose the 1. If they fuss, whenever they do work, if they fuss or complain, even if they do a chore and they do it complainingly, it doesn't count. We do another one until they do it with a good attitude. So you might with your kids say, hey, we're going to do school for 10 minutes. Only 10 minutes, no big deal. We're going to do school for 10 minutes. We're going to set a timer. If you do a good job, and I believe you're happy, I have to believe you're happy. I tell my kids that. If I sense you're not happy, we'll do another 10 minutes, okay? Or you'll do another worksheet or something like that. I have to believe you're happy because they can't fake it. So you're going to have a good attitude about it, and you're going to complete the work. But most parents just say, you're going to complete the work, and they'll sit there and they'll fight, and they'll get angry and all of this stuff, and the kid fusses, and then at the end of the day, he completes the work, and you're worn out, and you have to battle this every day. For me, the job doesn't count if you did it with a bad attitude. We've had our kids fight before, and I sent them out to do chores. And I said, okay, you're going to do the chore until you guys get along. Well, how much do we have to do? Until you get along. And then I'll come out there, and they'll, are you guys getting along? Yes. And they do a fake smile or something. You can just see that there's a little hostility or something. And I poke it a little bit and I see there's hostility. It doesn't, you're done. I'm out. I don't believe it. You do that enough times, eventually they genuinely become friends again, and they're giggling and having a good time, and then we can end it. So you can't just have the schoolwork as the goal. You have to have the schoolwork and the proper attitude. And then the next thing is you have to be realistic. If you set your kid up with the same hours as the public school system, and you think you're going to talk to him and lecture him as a little kid for 6 or 7 hours like the public school system does, it's just not possible. Your kid's going to get burned out. He's going to hate it. It's unnecessary. It's harmful. Yeah, it's just so be realistic too. Because as an adult, I went to real estate school a while ago. I have some rental properties. I was like, well, I'm just going to save my commission. I'm going to sell them myself, which I didn't end up doing. So I did all that for nothing. But I was back in the classroom, and we were in there for, I guess it was like 8 hours a day of class. And I did really well, actually. I did highest on the test, so it wasn't like I was not focused or anything. But man, it was boring. It was so painful. I mean, I remember thinking it was only a 2-week school, and I was like, man, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it for 6 months or a year again. It's too painful. Thank God I'm out of the school system. I hated that. And by the way, I sit and I write and I study all day. But the way school is done is horrifically boring. It's painfully, long, it's numb. I talk about in the book, The Learning Pyramid. You're being lectured to. It's one of the more passive forms of learning. Is listening. So the kid's going to fall asleep and stuff. Has to be active. I talk about that. Once it's active, once the kid is teaching, have the kid teach you the lesson. Explain it to you. He'll be awake. He'll be interested. Pretend you don't understand. Wait, what? And be silly with it or whatever you want to do. But you have to develop active learning and get your kid active learning. Have him teaching you. Anyway, those are just tips in the book. I don't want to go into all of them, but those are just some ideas. Attention, double load motivation. You have to have the right attitude. Attitude is everything. Attitude will bring. I mean, we learned this in the mission in combat. Somebody has a bad attitude. Somebody starts grumbling. We would do these long ruck marches. Somebody starts belly aching about their feet, or I'm tired, or how much farther. They just killed your mission. Because it is contagious, and that attitude, it'll further deteriorate. You have to nip it in the butt. If you're a leader and somebody starts questioning your authority or complaining about your leadership or about the load or how fast you're moving, you have to immediately nip that in the butt, because they'll start to grumble more and more, and it'll build resentment inside of them. You cannot tolerate it for a minute, and then they'll get used to the disrespect and they'll keep going. So you have to nail it right away. You can't tolerate it. We're going to do school and you're going to enjoy it. If you can't enjoy it, then we're going to keep doing it until you love it. And that's what I told my kids. We can do this until you love it. And you can love it now and we can be done, or we can do it forever. You can acquire a taste. I tell them that all the time. When I first had coffee, I thought it was gross, or beer was gross. I love it. You can learn to acquire a taste, and we're just going to do this until you love it. So attitude counts. Okay, next thing, punishment. There is a time for defiance. If your kid isn't complaining, kind of that passive-aggressive stuff, but they're just defiant. They look at, I'm not doing it, or they throw a fit or something, then you have to punish them. You have to punish them, discipline them, good old-fashioned way. I talk about in the book. I make a great case for it. I explain why it can only be done a certain way. We don't have any issues like that. My kids wouldn't dare defy me. It's not like they're quaking with fear, they're abused, but they wouldn't dare. And I see other people with their kids, and their kids are always whining and always complaining and always disrespecting them. My kids wouldn't dare blatantly disobey me because we have proper discipline in the home. So I would highly recommend you reading that book. I think a lot of the modern child experts have lost that. If you look at how they deal with their own kids, they can't control their own kids. So you're going to have to, I think the only way you can get it is from my book. I've read other people's parenting books, and they might have a little snippet. I think I even read Dr. James Dobson, God bless him, great guy, and he has a thing on spanking, and it's just this little snippet. It doesn't really say much about it. Mine's a big fat chapter, and it just explains everything in detail, the importance of corporal punishment and why it is the best, and debunks a lot of the negative that's out there about it, like making you think it's abusive. It's not. I promise. Read it. You can't think otherwise. I lay it out for you. It's really good. Okay. The final thing. Ashley, I don't know if you're here. I guess you probably didn't make it tonight. If you're watching this later, you can ask questions. I'll try to address them. If you don't have any other questions, or anybody else doesn't right now, I just want to address this last thing. When should you throw in the towel? When is it you've tried this homeschooling thing and it's just not working, and your kid would be better off, the whole family would be better off if you put him back in the school? At what point do you throw in the towel? My answer is never. You just can never do it. Failure is not an option. If you want greatness for yourself, when we started Blue Manor Academy, we didn't try it out. I was like, I swear, I will, we will be successful or die, trying. And we've been successful, but it took us 5 years to build it up and to write the books. Oh my goodness. I thought I was going to whip these books out. I was going to work so hard, and I'd have this whole series out in a year or 6 months. It's been long and grueling process. We have had to remake books and learn formatting and stuff, but failure was never an option. And in this, when you read Revealing School and you realize what they do to kids in the public school system, and you're thinking, again, I know what you're thinking. You can't fathom it. You just think well, I mean, they might, be some liberal stuff, but at least they're learning to read and stuff. No, you're setting your kids up for failure. That's it. That's the only thing. But you have to read the book. I know you can't believe that until you read the book. Once you realize how destructive public education is by design for your children, homeschooling cannot be an option. You have to be homeschooling. Public school cannot be an option. You have to homeschool kids. It has to be off of the table. And if it's not off of the table, you probably won't be successful. Okay, think back. This is like ancient. Hopefully, and this is stuff they don't teach anymore. But hopefully, I'll teach you this lesson. Hopefully, your kids will get it. Okay, but this is primary. Okay, they call it burning the ships. And you got Julius Caesar. And like Julius Caesar is one of the greatest conquerors of all time. And he gets to this island. I think it was the Britons. It could have been the Gauls, but I think it was Britain, Great Britain. So he gets there and he sees these. And Romans are tiny little people. They're like me. They're like 5'6". They're little people, and they're looking at these giants, and they're up on a cliff. They pull up on the beach, and they're in their boats, and the enemy's up on the cliff, and they're just outnumbered. I don't know, 10-1, but I don't know if it was that, but it was huge. They're outnumbered, and these guys are huge, crazy-looking warriors, and they got the high ground already. And the Romans start looking back to the ships, the soldiers. But Caesar is a conqueror. He's a great man. He was raised for greatness, like I talked about. He was bred and raised for greatness. And so he tells his captains, he's like, go burn the ships. They're like, can we just like hide the ships so that the men aren't thinking about him? He's like, no, burn them. Burn them actually in sight of the troops. I want my men to see the ships burn, go down to the sea. And it's an important principle because his success depended on that. As long as those boats are there, the soldiers are going to fight half-heartedly. And they're going to think, oh, if things get tough, we'll just run to the boats, okay? That actually happened to the Greeks, right? If at the battle, the Trojans, they were too close to the ships and they started getting pushed and then they turned and fled to the ships and then they got cut down because they turned their backs and the enemy broke the line, right? So as long as your retreat is there, that safety net is there, you're not going to take it seriously. You're going to be halfway in the fight. So with homeschooling, as long as public school is an option, like, hey, if it doesn't go well, we can just put them in school, you'll be half-hearted. You'll question yourself. You won't be really dedicated. And when the going gets tough, that's what happened. The same thing happens with divorce. You used to swear an oath, for better or worse, till death do us part. And today we say, well, if it's just not working out, we'll break it, That happened to me in military school. I got lots of divorces. I was roommates with people. I'm not a friendly roommate. I was a sergeant. I took it way too seriously. I would just and I was a sergeant. Right away, they made me a corporal. I don't know. They saw something in me. They're like, you're a corporal. And I was like a little bulldog. And then I would corporal my roommates. It was horrible. I learned eventually not to do that. But I didn't get along with a lot of my roommates. And so I went one room change. We didn't get along. So we got a room change. Then they put me in this other room. They were delinquents. Actually, this other guy, he wanted out of that room. So all right, cool. We'll just swap you. We'll put you in that room. These guys were crazy. They were just crazy. You couldn't get along with them. You couldn't study. You couldn't do anything in that room. They were crazy. Eventually, they just moved me out. I had to get another room change. And those two, they never moved anybody else in there with them because they were crazy. And they deserved each other. So I went to another room. And then there's another roommate in there that me and my other buddy, there's three of us, and we didn't like him, and he got a room change. So it's just me and my buddy. And we start to fight, and we don't like each other. And so I go down to get another room change. And finally, my TAC officer's like, Sergeant LaTulip, I don't care if you guys murder each other, you're never changing a room. So you can either go up there and you can make the best of it, or you can kill each other. But you're not getting another room change. So I'm like, oh gosh. So I go back upstairs. And guess what? We became best friends. It's actually one of the few people I've kept in touch with over the years. I think he friended me or I friended him. I got on Facebook, I guess it's been 20 years. And we remembered each other. We're like old friends. But if we'd been allowed to quit, we would have left on bad terms. And we never would have worked out. But when I went up there, I was like, hey, man, he said we're never leaving rooms. And immediately, something broke down. And not like we broke down and cried or anything. But I mean, the barriers broke down. And we're like, we're going to have to make the best of this. And we did. We actually became great friends. So you have to take failure off the table. You have to take that retreat, escape off the table. And you're more likely to be successful. Okay. They call it burning the bridge. Sometimes they say don't burn your bridges because sometimes it doesn't work out well. But you can also burn the bridge. The Romans do that too, You cross that river, you burn the bridge. No retreat, right? In the Art of War, they talk about that. They said always give you never trap an army in the Art of War, okay? Sun Tzu, the Art of War. Never trap an army. You'll take cowards and they'll turn ferocious. They'll be wounded. They have no escape route. But as long as you leave them an opportunity to escape, when the battle gets hard pressed, instead of them becoming ferocious animals back up against the wall, they'll turn and they'll run, and then you'll cut them down, okay? So as long as you have that escape route, your odds of being successful are very low. Finally, like you said, you start to read the books. You have to read the whole series, and what's more is coming, and you will get this. It's very easy. I promise you, I could. This is going to sound arrogant, but it's not trying to be. I could take your son right now and start homeschooling him. I have no problems with him. I do this all the time in Sunday school even. We've had kids that I go in there and the boys they're like, oh, the boys don't care or something. And then I teach and kids are like, oh, the parents will say, oh, for some reason he just loves your class or something like that. I just deploy the methods in this book. And I've taught a lot of kids over the years. I've helped with youth groups and different Sunday school programs and homeschool groups. And if you follow the methods in this book, you will be successful. It's not super hard. There's nothing wrong with your kid. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your family unit. Like, you are fully equipped to do this, but you have to believe in it. And I would say too, I meant to say this earlier, but if you have a husband who's starting to lose faith in the system, it's probably not his fault. I'm just guessing, you've probably started to lose faith in yourself. And if you lose faith in yourself, other people are going to lose faith in you too. Like, you have to, if it was me and I was the wife, I'd be like, I will show you. I want 6 months, whatever. You'll be so impressed. You have to lead by example. You can't doubt yourself. You have to go for it. And believe in the process. He's 6 or 7 years old. I think people, especially when it's their oldest kid, they don't know what to expect, and they start to get really worried. Is he behind? Or this isn't going well? Or we homeschooled this one day and he just didn't love it. This is a process. We're not talking about 6 months. We're talking about 6 years or 7 or 8 years. We have a long journey to go. It's okay if he's stumbling right now. Every kid has to go through this process. Okay, the military school didn't get a hold of me until I was, I guess, 15, and they only had me for 2 years. It transformed my life. It transformed my life almost immediately. So that kind of contradicts the process. But I guess the point is that for years, there was stumbling, and it seemed like there was something wrong with me, right? The schools couldn't help me. The police couldn't help me. My preacher couldn't help me. The counselors couldn't help me. The therapists, teachers, my parents, nobody could help me. But then I was put in the environment in this military prep school, and they knew exactly what to do, and they transformed my life immediately, and they did it for everybody. I mean, everybody. There was a kid there, and he was like a total bum, and supposedly he was like, it was prison or this military boarding school, and his parents were rich enough to pay for this military boarding school, and so he was just a total loser or something like that. Everybody kind of thought, but guess what? He never misbehaved, hardly ever. Immediately transformed by the school, and by the end of it, he was one of the higher ranking officers. So if you deploy the proper techniques, you'll have great success. But it's about leadership. It shouldn't be all on you. Hopefully your husband would be working from home and you'd be raising your children together. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in anymore by design. And so it's going to be a burden on you. And moms aren't the best disciplinarians, generally speaking. I don't mean to be offensive. It's just the way it is. Dads probably aren't the most compassionate, and that's why you need a team. A good cop, bad cop. You guys contrast with each other. Moms are awesome. I mean, they will do the heavy lifting. They'll love their kids. They'll read to their kids all day. My wife is so much more patient with the kids than I am. But then you got to learn to discipline, or your husband's got to help you. They definitely on mom's watch. Sometimes things start to deteriorate. The standards and the rules. So anyway, that might be something you talk with your husband about too. Is like, hey, like, get on board, help me, help me make this thing work. He needs some more discipline. Can you take him out? Like, and fathers have like more of that. They do so much better, men in the military. Just that mindset, that military. It's not as compassionate. It's about hardline rules and stuff like that. And your husband may be able to help you with that. And if he's invested in the process, he's put some work in, he's going to be a lot more like wanting it to be successful because his name is on it. But if it's just the mom, it's a lot easier. And I'm not saying this is anything against your husband. It's just human nature to be like, well, you're screwing up. Like, let's go a different route or something like that. But as soon as the husband's reputation is on the line too, he's not going to want to admit failure. He's going to want to be successful. And I think husbands, they add something to it, especially with the discipline. So I would try to incorporate your husband in it. Hopefully this has been informative. Hopefully I've answered some of your questions. I will say you have to read the books because I do such a better job. I'm a way better author than I am just coming on here and kind of randomly explaining things. I go through the system in the book. If you deploy it, it's not hard. Okay, raising children is not as difficult as we make it out to be. You just have to understand the process. You have to understand the ages, how they work, You have a baby, what is a baby capable of? You have, up to 5 years, 6 years old. They have a certain mentality. It's more about fun. It's more about play, and you can just read and stuff like that. They start hitting 7, things start to shift. They start to notice cute girls. I always do that test. That's a subject for another day. I always do that test to see where they're at. If I ask my 3-year-old, oh, is there a cute girl or anything? Whatever, they don't even know what I'm talking about. I said that to my boy, Jonathan. He just turned 7. I forget what we were talking about. I don't remember, but I'll have that be a conversation someday about using the opposite sex as a motivator, because it's powerful. And I remember I said something like, oh, maybe, is there any cute girls or something you could show that picture because he loves his art too? And he goes, like smirks something. So I'm like, okay, he's aware of girls. That's another powerful motivator. But at that age, they start to transition. They haven't hit puberty, of course, but they start to notice girls. They start to think more logically. That's why they always call that 7 the age of reason. If you're, the Orthodox, the older churches and stuff like that, the parents could have the child baptized before that age, and then after that age, the child has to make a statement of faith because they've transitioned past the age of reason. So it needs to be their own decision, right? So there is a special age of reason. That's why I asked, how old is your kid? Oh, he's 7. Okay, so now we need to start transitioning from merely fun and using some of those other more powerful motivators. And anyway, I just highly recommend you to read the books. Ashley, I hope that helps you. If you have more questions, follow-up questions, just list them below. I can answer those later. If anybody else watching has questions, either post them on my page. I may not post them on the page right away. If you have a private question, like I'm struggling with this, but I don't necessarily want it on the home page, you can message me privately and just say, hey, can you not share this or share my name or whatever? And I absolutely will answer it either privately or here, but I won't mention your name and your situation. But let me know, you guys, I want you to be successful. Anybody that's on this page, I'm going to see your kids at the top someday. It would break my heart if you guys quit. I feel like I failed you as a leader if you guys quit. When you have these issues, you got to read the book. You got to follow the system. But I'm invested in your success. So any questions, anything I can do for you, that's my whole mission. I'm not just a homeschooling parent. That's my mission, greatness for my own kids. But then I'm also leading this school, this academy, this movement. So I need you to be successful. I will help you any way I can. So, all right, thank you so much. And hopefully it was helpful. I will talk to you next week.